our State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It has been quite a week in politics as the impacts of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump and the subsequent Republican National Convention ripple throughout the country and here into Alabama. A large contingent of Alabama Republicans were in Milwaukee this week attending the convention. There were delegates elected by primary voters to officially nominate Trump, plus several of the state's political leaders, some of whom played prominent roles at the convention. Leading off was U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville, who served as the delegation chairman and led the nomination of Trump from the convention floor.
Alabama, 50 delegates.
Madam Chair, I'm Coach Senator Tommy Tuberville and proud to represent the great state of Alabama, one of the most pro-military and pro-veteran states in the country. Huntsville, Alabama has sent somebody to the moon for the United States in the past. We will do it again in the very near future. We stand for the flag and kneel for God. Amen. Madam Chair, we proudly cast our 50 delegates for the next President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
U.S. Senator Britt had a primetime speaking slot on Monday. That was the day Republicans themed around economic issues, and Britt spoke from the perspective of a mother of two school-age children.
To my fellow moms and dads across America, I think we all know that raising a family is hard. Add in smartphones and social media, and we already had plenty to worry about. But then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came around. Now our lives are that much more difficult and way more expensive. Under Biden-Harris, prices are high and expectations, well, they're low. Grocery prices are up more than 21%. Electricity is up 31%. Gas is up 48%. Mortgage rates have more than doubled, and rent is skyrocketing. To me, these aren't just numbers. This is pain for millions of Americans.
I spent part of the week in Milwaukee as well, talking with members of Alabama's delegation to get their perspective on this pivotal moment in American politics. I caught up with Senator Britt the morning after her speech to talk about what that was like and get her thoughts on the presidential race going forward.
What was that like, going out in that stage like that, in the arena, in front of not just your state, the convention, but the whole world?
It was incredible. I mean, I had so much fun. First off, kind of walking out there, you could feel the energy of not just the convention, but I feel like the energy of the nation right now. I think we are ready to put the country back on track. It was exciting. The moment I stood up at the podium, you could hear the Alabama section, so it was a great welcome and a great start to what I believe was a direct speech that captured where we are, particularly with the economy. I mean, Todd, you know, people know that the dollar in their pocket does not go as far under Joe Biden, and people are ready for change.
After your speech, you got to sit in the box with President Trump. After his entrance, I mean, that was a pretty big deal. I'm wondering if y'all had any interaction at all.
When he walked in, and you could see him on the screen, I mean, God Bless America playing, you could see the emotion in his face. You could feel the emotion in the arena. We were sitting right behind his children, so had spoken to Tiffany and obviously Eric and Don Jr. and Kimberly were right in front of us. And you could feel the seriousness of the moment, the gratitude that they felt for his safety, and I think the hope that we all feel for the country moving forward. So it was incredible to be his guest, to be asked to be in that small space and sit with him in his very first public appearance since the assassination attempt. But I will say the energy, the emotion, the hope and the unity that we felt last night will carry us through. And I think obviously we'll see it on Election Day as well.
Talked about the assassination attempt. Does it feel like a different party, maybe even a different country in terms of that was a wake-up call maybe? And will it be a different party? He's talked about maybe even being a different candidate, having a near-death experience like that. Any sense of that from you?
I mean, having had a near-death experience myself, I can tell you that you really do wrestle with not only God's grace, but God's purpose for your life. And I think you appreciate that every single day is an opportunity to do better, to be better, and that there is a reason that God allowed you to continue to walk this earth, that He's not finished with you, and that there is more you need to do to further His kingdom and to further His plan. And so I think you will see that with President Trump. I mean, you know that time is of the essence and that you're not guaranteed another day. And so bringing people together for a common goal, which is really saving the greatest nation that the globe has ever known and putting it back on track and doing it in a way where Americans, no matter the side of the aisle, can get behind the agenda and move forward, I think is what you'll see. And I think that, you know, we've talked about the electorate, and the Republican Party has never been more unified. So, Todd, a couple of weeks ago, President Trump came, this is obviously prior to the assassination attempt, came to the NRSC. He sat down with all of the Republican senators, sat right next to Mitch McConnell, sat, you know, right across the room from Senator Tuberville and I, Mitt Romney and Dan Sullivan, and everyone across the spectrum of the Republican Party was in one room. And in my 19 months in the Senate, I've never left a more unifying meeting where people knew that saving our country, putting hard-working Americans first, securing our border, getting back to business and doing the work of the people was the most important thing. And we all left that room with that unification. Now, after what we've seen in the last couple of days, you continue to just see that energy, kind of almost a flame being put underneath it. It's ignited in a way that I think will not only serve our party well and in the way that we bring people in, but ultimately will serve our nation well, because it'll give us the ability to do some really good things. And I am excited to get to be a part of it.
Last question, J.D. Vance.
Yes, yes.
You're his, like I said, freshman class colleague.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Were you excited to hear that? And
I was thrilled. I mean, I'm just so excited. So, I mean, it's not often that one of your friends gets named the vice presidential candidate for the United States of America. So we were so happy for him, happy for Usha, excited for the nation to get to know more about JD, his policies, his heart, his passion, his story. So right at the very beginning, when they put you in the Senate, I have said that how they humble you is they put you in a basement with cinder block windows, no air conditioning, and a lack, kind of sort of a lack of movement down there. And I was down in the basement with John Fetterman, with J.D. Vance, and myself. And so we started literally on the ground floor together. And I am thrilled to see him lead in this way. You know, we've had the opportunity, we get together for dinner once a month, all of the freshman Republicans, and we've gotten to know each other, not just our policy positions and what we want to see different or ask each other personnel questions, but Todd, we've gotten to know each other as people. And I am excited for the United States of America to get to know JD, because they're going to be excited about his leadership and his vision for the country.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I also caught up with Alabama Congressman Robert Aderholt and Barry Moore outside an event on Lake Michigan there in Milwaukee. One interesting thought that they shared was that whereas 8 years ago, many Republicans remained skeptical or even opposed to Trump at the convention, this time around, the party is almost universally united behind him.
Well, every convention has its own personality, and I actually have fun. You always remember your first conventions very fondly. My wife and I were delegates in 1992 for George Bush, and we were still dating at the time. And we were actually getting serious in our dating relationship during that convention. So we always think about that during convention time. But yeah, it's just really, I think on the heels of what happened on Saturday, I think has really made this convention a little bit different. I mean, obviously security is always top priority at any convention, but this one just a little different because of the nominee, you know, coming within a millimeters of losing his life just hours before the convention started. So I think that sort of had the cloud over this, but it's a very good convention. Great to be here in Milwaukee. First time I've ever been to Milwaukee. Of course, you can see Lake Michigan behind me. It's a beautiful city, and I don't know how it is in the winter, but in the summer here, it's beautiful.
Well, the one thing I loved was his policies. I mean, what he did for the country, the securing the border, getting inflation under control. Gas prices came down. We were net energy exporters. I think there was a lot of things he did, but it's just like J.D. Vance. You know, J.D. Vance was a never Trump guy early on, but he said, I got to know the man. And when you get to know him, you really see that he is a billionaire who could ride off in the sunset and let this nation burn, but he loves his country, and he's in it for the right reasons. He don't need the fame. He don't need the money. But he loves his country. He's seen the opportunity seized by free markets and just the liberty that we're offered here. And so for me, it's a culmination of endorsing him early on and seeing him serve with great policy, and then seeing him punished in a way that he's been punished by the left in this nation, and yet he's still a fighter. There's not enough that can be said about his courage and his character.
Congressman Jerry Carl was also at the convention. Back in March, he lost the primary election to Barry Moore in the 1st district that saw the two congressmen drawn in together. But Carl remains actively engaged in politics and has some thoughts about how Republicans should campaign between now and November.
I think the best thing we can do is stay out of Biden's way, keep telling our story as we want to see it play out. You know, if he takes office, we want everyone to understand what his focus, that the administration's focus is. But just let Biden keep being Biden. You know, I think that we'll see some real changes. I don't know necessarily if they'll get him out of the way or not. I hope they don't. I want him to stay right where he's at. But it's going to get pretty nasty for the Democrat Party, and we already see that in Washington now.
For some convention goers, this was their first time attending the RNC. That included Secretary of State Wes Allen and Commissioner of Agriculture Rick Pate.
Yeah, my first convention after all these years in local Republican politics, state politics, elected office. It's exciting to be here. A lot of excitement in the room last night, especially when President Trump came in. That was exciting, an electric atmosphere. The party is energized, galvanized around President Trump and J.D. Vance, now his vice presidential pick. So I'm just glad to be a part of history, glad to be here with the delegation, and it's exciting times.
Well, not ever having done this before. I was actually elected a delegate 4 years ago, which we never got to come because of COVID, but yeah, it's fun. It's a lot. The Republican people are so passionate, and I grew up, mother running as a Republican in 1966 after being inspired by Goldwater, and so yeah, it's just fun to be around. People are so nice, and the excitement here is just unbelievable.
Some in the delegation have attended many conventions. State Senator Jabba Wagner told me he's attended every convention since 1984. You've been coming to these conventions for a long time. When did you start coming to Republican conventions?
My first convention was 1988 as either a delegate or alternate delegate. Every 4 years I've run for delegate, and I've been doing it consistently since 1988. 1984, I ran for Congress, and I was invited to come to Dallas, not as a delegate or an alternate delegate, just as a candidate. So I've been coming since '84, but I've been either a delegate or an alternate since '88.
Party's seen a lot of changes over those years, but what's maybe remained the same?
The fun we have, the camaraderie among the delegates and the alternates, and the friends that we've met through the years coming to conventions. So this will be my 9th this year.
So you were a leading Republican in Alabama when there weren't a whole lot of elected Republicans in Alabama. Now Republicans dominate the state. How's that been, just to see the sea change from the 80s through the 90s into the 2000s?
Well, early on when I was coming to conventions, you know, still a lot of Democrats in Alabama and the country, and there still is, of course, but the momentum has changed over the years, and it's kind of, I'd say, dominating by the Republican Party now.
Yeah, no question. What are you most excited to hear about, as President Trump gets to speak?
Watching him last night, hearing him last night, it just made a lot of hearts feel very warm toward him because of what he went through last week. I mean, he stood up, we saw him on camera with a big bandage over his ear, and it was just very emotional. It could have been a bad scene last week, but he survived, and the momentum is in our favor this year.
Well, Senator Britt had a prominent role. She's a bright young leader in the party. What's it been like to see her rise pretty suddenly?
Oh, so encouraging to see this bright young woman from Alabama having a major role in the operation of the Republican politics in Alabama. Very bright lady, very articulate, and she's going to be a difference maker in the U.S. Senate.
One last word from Milwaukee. Alabama Republican Party Chairman John Wall also played a prominent role at the convention. He told me that he senses a changed candidate in Donald Trump and a re-energized party in the wake of the shooting in Pennsylvania.
This convention is unique. We kind of have that solemnness for the victims from up in Pennsylvania, but at the same time, Donald Trump wants it to go forward. He wants to talk about the values that the Republican Party believes in. He wants to talk about where we stand and how our values are going to help the American people have a healthier and more successful life. And so we want to stay on that vein. Bring America together. We should all be looking for the same things. We should all be going, trying to help the people of America defend their freedoms and help them have a better life.
Again, it was quite a week up there in Milwaukee. The Democratic National Convention is scheduled for August 19th through 22nd in Chicago. Alabama doesn't have quite as many Democratic elected officials, than the GOP at least, but we will certainly be covering that convention and getting reaction from Alabamians in Chicago a month from now. And stay tuned for my interview with political scientist Dr. David Hughes later in the show. We'll talk about this incredibly volatile political moment that is now upon us. Here in the State House this week, lawmakers and executive agency leaders gathered for the first of a series of budget hearings to look at revenue and spending projections for the next fiscal year. While the last few years have seen record budgets, some are starting to see warning signs of a slowdown. Jeff Sanders has that story.
Record budgets. That's what lawmakers in Alabama passed during the most recent legislative session. $9.3 billion for the State Education Trust Fund and $3.4 billion for the General Fund.
We're in good shape this year, and I think with the budget that we passed that starts in October, we're going to be good for that. Our concern is 26.
Republican Senator Greg Albritton, who chairs the Senate General Fund Committee, joined other lawmakers from the House and Senate for a joint budget hearing at the State House.
We don't know what the economy is going to do. We've been riding the crest of a wave here now for a long time, and we know something is going to happen. We just don't know when or how.
Lawmakers were briefed on the budget by Kirk Fulford, the Deputy Director of the Legislative Services Agency.
Thankfully, you have not been spending in your budget in a way that would make you have to continue receiving that amount of money. You just need to understand that that has to continue because you won't have the big leftover balances going forward in the next couple of years that you're going to be able to do the huge supplemental appropriation bills with.
For example, during the 2023 budget year, interest on state deposits generated more than $400 million in revenue. But with the loss of federal stimulus funding and potentially lower interest rates in the future, that amount will be drastically reduced.
Between now and December of 26, a huge decline in the amount of monies that we hold on deposit. So regardless of what the rate is, just the amount that's available to earn interest on will be in significant decline.
You're right, to that point, we're spending it down over the next couple of years and through other processes. The timing and the amount of the unwinding is going to be, if anybody can predict that over the next couple of years, and with a possible change of administration.
Despite the warning, lawmakers like Albritton emphasize the importance of planning now to ensure Alabama's financial future remains stable. Reporting from the State House in Montgomery, I'm Jeff Sanders for Capital Journal.
School will be starting back in just a few weeks, and that means it's back-to-school shopping season. Just in time, Alabama's annual sales tax holiday is this weekend, offering shoppers a little relief. Randy Scott reports.
Visit any store nowadays and you'll see the signs. Back-to-school items on full display, letting people know it's time to start getting ready for a new school year. The costs for getting ready have grown, but thanks to lawmakers, there's help for that.
The legislature decided to pass a piece of legislation many years ago that would allow families to shop for back to school in a sales tax holiday weekend.
It's a time where discounts give a revenue boost to state and local communities while saving shoppers money.
When it first started, it was actually in August, but because school starts so early now, they've moved it back to this weekend in July. So parents can get that school list that they need for their children to go back to school.
The goal, giving consumers a financial break when shopping for vital supplies, in this case, items for back to school. But it also shows shoppers what else is out there in terms of goods, services, and restaurants, perhaps making them repeat customers.
You'll find that people are out shopping that day. They start early, they have a list. They're going to eat lunch somewhere, or they're going to get an extra cup of coffee that day. You know, make it a point to go in a locally owned business.
Giving citizens a chance to check over their list of must-haves twice, just as they do on that other holiday in December, except this is in the heart of summer heat.
You know, you think about school supplies, it's notebook paper and folders and markers and paste and glue sticks and pencils and all of those items, but it also includes computers up to a maximum amount that you can get sales tax free, copy paper, printers, all of those items that school kids now use.
But the savings don't stop there.
In addition to school supplies, you also get clothing up to $100 per item. So you're looking for those school shoes, you're looking for uniforms because many kids wear uniforms to school, but also it's for anyone. And so you can get those sales tax items.
This program also sets up a process of community improvement by shopping locally.
In Montgomery County, for instance, it's a 10% sales tax, and Montgomery County is participating, so you're automatically going to get 10% off, and if it's already marked 50% off, then think about it. You got a 60% savings on a piece of clothing that you may have been looking at in May, but thought, I'll just wait a little bit. Well, this is your perfect opportunity to get 60% off.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
One more item before we get to the interview portion of the show. This week, 2 massive new ship-to-shore cranes arrived at the Port of Mobile. Take a look at the size of these things. According to the Alabama Port Authority, the new cranes represent a $40 million investment made as part of the dredging project that is going to deepen and widen the port channel. Port Authority Director John Driscoll said all told, there will be $1 billion invested into Alabama's port by 2030.
This has been a long time coming. It's a process that started probably over 2 years ago, and it was related to the widening and the deepening of the channel, where customers saw that this was something that would be interesting for them for increasing their efficiencies through the port and investing even more.
Coming up after the break, I'll be joined by State Representative Jeana Ross. Stay with us.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is the newest member of the Alabama legislature, State Representative Jeana Ross. Representative, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Todd.
Again, the newest member of the Alabama legislature. You recently won a special election in House District 27. That was a vacancy.
That's right.
He got promoted to the Senate. Now, our viewers are, most of them probably very familiar with you in your previous role as Secretary of Early Childhood Education. But now you're in the legislature, so maybe reintroduce yourself to the audience about your career and what led you to this.
Well, I started out teaching years ago in a little rural community in Jackson County. I taught, then stayed home when my children were young, then went back to teaching, and started out actually as a teacher's aide in a pre-K classroom. That was back when they were just Title I pre-Ks. And a couple of years later, learned of a grant that was available, and it was when they first started the state pre-K program. So I wrote a grant for our system at that time, and we got it. Well, once you start writing grants, you begin to administer those grants. So I later became the coach for all the pre-K classrooms in Marshall County. Then I moved to Boaz City, and then Madison City. So along the way, I sprinkled early childhood education programs and family and children programs. I also worked with at-risk programming at the time. They call that student support services now. But enjoyed all of that, and then in 2012 was asked to serve on the governor's cabinet as the Secretary of the Department of Early Childhood Education. And that was when we had 219 classrooms in the state of the pre-K classrooms. And that grew over the next 7 to 8 years to over 1,300. So had quite a jump in our funding, and that's because we were accountable and we had a very effective and efficient system, which I think was still recognized nationally as being one of the very best in the country. So very proud of that, and proud of the time I got to spend working in the field with school systems, like I said, Jackson County, Guntersville City, Marshall County, and then Boaz City and Madison City. So also I was able, when I was campaigning, I would say, you know, I've worked with or for every school system in this district. So I understand particularly the education needs, concerns, and challenges and successes that not only District 27, but across the state, being able to travel and visit in schools.
Yeah, and I want to go deeper on the early childhood and first class pre-K because your work there is really significant, and some would call it legendary. But what led you to run? Because as much as you've been involved, like as you said, on the statewide level, member of the governor's cabinet, I mean, that's a big deal. But it's not elected office. This is elected. This is politics.
It is.
So what led you to throw your name in the hat and say, I want to represent this district?
Well, I've asked people, or people have asked me, why in the world do you want to go back to Montgomery? And I said, well, when I thought about it, it was just the right thing to do. I spent 8 sessions on the other side, you know, advocating and hoping to find support and funding from the legislature for programs for children and families. So I understand that process and what it feels like, and I just thought, well, I'll be available and empathetic to the people that are doing the same thing. So I hope to be able to serve and be effective and efficient and really make a difference, support policy that really makes an impact for positive change.
Well, yeah, it's great to hear you say that because, you know, serving in the legislature is a service. It's not like it's highly paid or something like that. And so sometimes there is a concern about being able to kind of get people that are quality of you know, good people to actually serve in the legislature. So it can be tough to recruit, you know, quality candidates. So kudos to you for standing up and saying, I want to serve. You mentioned a couple of those issues. What are going to be your priorities? Obviously, education's right there,
Yes.
but what are your priorities going to be as you begin your service in the House?
Well, of course, education and early childhood education, because we know that 90% of a child's brain is developed by age 5, and we can support those, particularly not just the pre-K program, but what's going on in child care is very important. We've got mental health issues with children and adults, and our veterans. You know, I was very pleased to see that there's going to be a comprehensive plan put together between mental health and the Veterans of Foreign Affairs, or Veterans, State Veterans System, to be able to have veterans access easily. I know there are resources there. I met with a group, Veterans of Foreign Affairs, that's what was on my mind earlier, and veterans with disabilities, and that was last Saturday. And even though there may be resources available, sometimes they just don't have the know-how or the facilitator, a liaison to help them through that. I know we have some, but I don't know that they know about it. I was speaking with one man that spent years trying to get the mental health services he needed after serving 4 deployments in Iraq. And he really needed some help. So he's found that now, and I think that's wonderful. But to be able to support our veterans also is important to me. Our seniors, I've been able to, since the election, of course was not able to get here in time for the session, but I've been able to go around and visit, and I've gone to just about everything I have been invited to and more. And I went to a senior health fair at our local park, and senior centers from all across the county were there, and to listen this was quite an event too, and to listen to them and listen to the directors about their needs and concerns and things that might be more helpful to help them do their work and to serve this wonderful group of seniors that we have in our state.
Yeah, let's talk about education a little bit. You talked to, your time at the Department for Early Childhood, you're right, it was a time of significant growth. But I can remember a time when expanding first class pre-K wasn't all that popular, right? There was more fights over, money wasn't quite as flush as it is right now. And so y'all had to really fight. You had to really advocate, and were successful at convincing the legislature year over year to increase that funding on a steady level, keeping the high quality. But that's interesting to me because now you're going to be on the other side. You're going to get requests from everybody about how to do things. But is maybe that an example, an instructive example of using results, using the quality, like you said, the accountability to convince the legislature, here's the priorities we need to set, here's the funding, sometimes the hard choices that have to be made on education issues, things like the Reading Initiative, things like the Numeracy Act. Is maybe that instructive toward how we can build support for other programs that will improve education?
Well, basically it's all about outcomes. And I learned very early on that we needed to have some type, of course we don't track data on our students, but we do follow outcomes. So we put together a research and evaluation team, and we were able over the years to be able to follow those children and not only see that the program was effective and efficient, but the outcomes were amazing. They were less likely to be referred for special ed services. They were more likely to not be retained in school, which is wonderful. I loved that because if they've gone to a first class pre-K, the Literacy Act and being retained in 3rd grade hopefully is not going to be something that applies to them. We also found that their attendance was better. Their student incident report numbers were better. And this was not something that faded out, which we saw in some other states. We were able to follow this. There was no fade out through the 8th grade. So, and that's as far as our sample size was large enough to really be able to report. So it won't be long that we'll be able to see that these students that were in these high quality programs, and it is all about quality. And the support that teachers get. We've got great teachers. But to make sure that they get the resources, the materials, the supplies that they need in the classroom, that they can use every day for their instructional practices and the things that they need to make sure that those children are getting the very best we can offer. And the professional development, I'm all about coaches. We had coaches in our pre-K classrooms off the bat, and it was a tiered coaching model. I mean, we've got master teachers that might not necessarily need a coach, and that's how we can more effectively spread those coaches where they're really needed. So with a tiered coaching model, I think that's another. effective, efficient way to support our teachers and make sure that they're encouraged. You know, we were the first department to really push letters, which is that science of reading program that's so critical for teachers, because we found that they really wanted and needed more information themselves on the science of reading. So I had been to Mississippi, and they had another convening, and some of our state legislators went, somebody from the governor's office, and I sent two of the people on the leadership team at the department. And when they came back, when we were talking about what they had seen and learned, the thing they did was they talked to the teachers. And the teachers had said, you know, this training that we received was very important. Well, we had some grant money left. This was on a Wednesday. And because we had grant systems pretty much a state of art in our department, because that's how we could be able to ensure that people understood what the program design was, what was expected through the funding, and how we could support them through technical assistance. So we had that system in place already, and I said, well, okay, we've got some grant money left over. Let's just do this. Let's offer it. Now, not as a mandate. Let's just see who wants to take it. And by Friday, we had a system set up. And by the next week, there was a waiting list. Because it was voluntary. The teachers that wanted to do it signed up for it, and when they finished it, now if they didn't finish, they had to reimburse us, because you know it was very expensive per teacher. But we also gave them a stipend at the end for being able to get that certification, and it just snowballed because they wanted it and they knew it mattered. And
everybody wants to do a good job.
They
right?
want to do a good job, and so the superintendent at the State Department of Ed took this over, embraced it, and then was able to get more funding. And I know that it's available now, not only, you know, through trainings, but now our colleges and universities are understanding that it's very important to have that instruction on the science of reading.
Yeah. Man, I hear you talk about that and just the different, you know, streamline of education. It seems like we're just so close. We're on the cusp of really doing something special in education. Well, has the speaker assigned to your committees yet? I'm assuming you would want to be on the education-related committees.
Well, he has. I'm going to be on the Education Policy Committee. And another one I'm very interested in, and I understand it's fairly new, I'm not sure how long, but it's the Children and Senior Advocacy Group, which is exactly a
right
committee.
Up your alley, yeah.
Yes, which I will thoroughly enjoy. And I just look forward to serving in any way I'm needed. I hope I'm known to give 110%, because I really believe that serving and providing people with what they need to be successful citizens is just a great mission.
Yeah, you came to the right place. So welcome back to the show,
Thank
I
you.
suppose.
Thank
and thanks
you.
again for coming on, and we'll look forward to keeping up with you. But congratulations, and welcome again to the legislature.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is political science professor Dr. David Hughes. Dr. Hughes, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I always enjoy it.
Well, I almost announced you as Auburn-Montgomery political science professor, but you've had a career change recently, and so tell us about this.
Yeah, that's right. The spring semester was my last with Auburn University of Montgomery. After 8 years, I'm moving down the road to Cajun country. I'm going to join University of Louisiana in Lafayette.
How about that? Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
But still teaching political science, right?
Political science, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I wanted to have you on. We are living in a historic political moment, volatile, to say the least. We had the debate. We had an attempted assassination. We've seen the RNC this week. It's just incredible. We see all the polling going on. So much is happening. So as a political science expert, and as a teacher. How do you reflect on this political moment?
Well, a lot of us thought that 2016 was going to be one of the more unique episodes in American politics in our lifetimes, and I'm not sure that many of us would have expected that just 8 years later, our national political scene would turn the dial up a couple more notches.
Yeah.
But you're right; it's volatile, it's unique. When I discuss this era in American politics with my students, I oftentimes compare it to the national stage in the 1890s. During that period, you had extremely volatile political parties. You had the emergence of populism. You had the reconsolidation of the two other major political parties. You had presidents who were elected, defeated, and then elected the next round again. And you had political assassinations, all during a period of wild economic instability. So, these.
Is that Cleveland you're talking about, Grover Cleveland?
Yeah. So the only president we've had who was elected non-consecutively. So if Trump were to do it, it would be the first time since that era in politics. So when we try to think about or game out where politics are likely to go, we don't have a whole lot of guideposts to help us think about this particular moment, except that periods like these do tend to end up with some political reorganization. The parties tend to change. Bases can move around as politicians attempt to maneuver themselves for the next era in party politics.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're absolutely right in terms of the base shifting and even policies, because who had the Teamsters president speaking at the RNC on their bingo card? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the big question at the moment, I guess, is will President Biden actually be the Democratic nominee? It seems clear that it's probably going to have to be his decision, barring some kind of 25th Amendment sort of thing. So I know it kind of depends which hour you're looking at Twitter and everything, but what's your take? Do you think we're going to have Biden-Trump ballot in November, or how likely is it that Biden actually drops out?
At this particular hour, I would probably put it at 50-50. It's hard to know exactly what to make of things at any moment because of just the sheer amount of posturing going on within the different factions of the Democratic Party, the sheer number of leaks that are happening from different offices or branches of government as politicians attempt to either move Biden another step toward the exit or to help entrench him in his current position. But the sheer number of Democratic leaders coming out and calling for change makes Biden's position really untenable. Even if he remains the nominee, having that many arrows in your back going into the general election makes the odds of success ever more slim. So if the Democrats are likely to be in a position to contest the 24 election, I suspect it's going to have to be with a different candidate.
Well, yeah, Republicans are supremely confident. I just got back from Milwaukee. It's a different vibe than I've ever seen in terms of confidence. You probably got to go back to like 2004 for confidence like that. Well, but the real impact is, for us at least in Alabama, is down ballot. I'm pretty sure I know where our electoral votes are going, right? That's not really in question. But we do have a very competitive congressional race here. After the courts redrew Alabama's 2nd district to give black voters an opportunity, a choice to elect someone of their choosing, it became basically a favored Democratic pickup. Cook Political Report, which is one of the gold standards for prognostication, put it at likely pickup, or at least in their last ratings. Might be different now, because you've got two candidates, Shamari Figures on the Democratic side, Caroline Dobson on the Republican side. You run this race 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to go Democratic. But given the problems at the top of the ticket with Biden, it impacts voter enthusiasm, right? So you're starting to see Republicans say, hey, we have a chance here. What is your take on that? Do you think that's right, or do you think it's still safe Democrat?
Well, at the top of the ticket, there's a huge enthusiasm gap. Republicans are very enthusiastic to turn out and support Trump. And in Alabama, that can immediately have down ballot effects because we still use a straight line voting device on our ballots. So Most Alabama voters, I think the last time I checked, it was about 3/4 of voters, whether it's Democrat or Republican, vote party line all the way down. So turnout, in my mind, is going to be the biggest threat to Democrats taking the redrawn second district. If Biden is at the top of the ticket, and if the mood come November is that he has no opportunity to win the election, that could have really significant effects down ballot, because people might say, well, why should I bother going out to the polls? It's such a done thing anyway. And not even thinking about, not even having the second district, in the front of their minds. That sort of thing could easily throw the election to the Republican Caroline Dobson. I don't know that there's going to be much of a persuasion game at play here, especially in Alabama politics where partisanship is so polarized. Not many people split their tickets anymore.
The die is cast.
Right. So I would think that that enthusiasm gap is the most likely way that Republicans hang on to that second district, is if Democrats don't turn out because of their lack of enthusiasm for a Biden candidacy.
Mm-hmm. So it's incumbent upon Shamari Figures to persuade people to go out to vote. That's the game, right? He's got to convince voters, okay, even if the presidency is lost, Congress still matters. The majority might be on the line. That's got to be, but that's a tough thing to do, right? People don't necessarily think about Congress so much as they think about the presidency.
That's right, and today's politics in the United States are so nationalized. Local issues are so much less of a thing for voters these days than national issues, and so if there's already a drag on enthusiasm for the big ticket national races like the presidency, that does make it difficult for Democrats and for Mr. Figures to drive that turnout. So yeah, I would look to see what kind of retail politics Mr. Figures is engaged in order to get members of his base out to vote. And we'll have to see as we really get into now is prime time for the general election.
Mm-hmm. We did some reporting on the race last week, and this was pre-RNC and pre-assassination attempt, but it was post-debate, and Mr. Figures was still sticking by the president. He's our nominee. He did kind of start talking about that's the reason we have a 25th Amendment if it ever came to it. But it strikes me that should the Democrats change the top of the ticket, should something happen, and perhaps it's Kamala Harris leading the ticket, who would be, if elected, the first black female president of the United States. Could you see that benefiting a Shamari Figures candidacy?
Absolutely, yeah. We saw that black turnout in Alabama was way up in 2008 and 2012 when you had Barack Obama at the top of the ticket.
I remember.
And I'm not going to compare Kamala Harris to Barack Obama. I think there are some clear differences in the style of candidate that they would be. But the fact that you might have a black woman at the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party's nominee for president, again, could have a huge turnout effect for black mobilization. And that's the key for that district. When the federal courts redrew that district, it was to give black voters an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. And if black turnout is down in that district, it could easily lead to the election of a Republican. And so having a black candidate at the top of the ticket for the presidency could well help flip that seat to the Democratic side.
Interesting, and we're going to see it play out. And one thing I'm watching in this race is we did some reporting on the fundraising numbers. Dobson's ahead by a little, but significant amount. But I don't necessarily think it's the candidates themselves campaign spending that's going to be the big thing. I think it's going to be these super PACs, these outside groups that engage in TV ads, radio ads, mail, but also GOTV efforts. Talk about that, the impact of, in the old days, it was kind of you raise money, you put ads on TV, and that's kind of how you do it. These days, you get all these outside groups. That has to change the nature of the race.
Yeah, to a certain extent, it means that candidacies can't always be in charge of the message. When you have more groups engaged in these outside efforts to help steer the direction of the campaign, sometimes that can be really, really beneficial, right? If one of these outside operations is really efficient with their money and good at turning out voters, registering voters. Sometimes that can be problematic if one of these outside groups engages in messaging, for example, that the candidate doesn't approve of.
You can say, hey, we didn't do it, right?
Sure, but it could still be a major distraction from the themes that you would rather be talking about.
Right.
So, more expensive campaigns typically lead to more turnout. That's one of those ironclad findings in political science, is that expensive campaigns are well-advertised campaigns. Well-advertised campaigns help voters to know who's running, what the issues are, and what they stand for, and it helps them to either show up at the ballot box or at least not leave items on their ballot blank because they presumably know something about the candidates. So, there's going to be a lot of money spent. And in a U.S. House election that can turn on a few seats, there's going to be some attention on this district. So I would expect that in the coming months we're going to be seeing a lot of advertising, whether it's on TV or billboards or internet advertising. I think we're just kind of getting into the meat of the election season here.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting what you said. It's not necessarily a persuasion game. There's not a lot of voters probably that are undecided about which side they're going to be on, especially in this environment. It'll be GOTV, right? Persuading you to get out to vote. I'm fascinated by how that's going to work out. We're going to have both candidates on Capitol Journal, hopefully a couple of different times. I really want to get into the issues that matter. But we won't have ads. We will not have political ads here on APT. Well, again, I just got back from Milwaukee, and it was striking to me because you mentioned 2016. And I was in Cleveland for that. Back then, there was still a lot of fragmentation within the Republican Party. You had a lot of, the never Trump sort of crowd. You had the Ted Cruz kind of floor challenge a little bit. Plenty of Republicans were not okay with Donald Trump. Trump skeptical, maybe we will call it. That was not the case in Milwaukee. It was striking to me how united Republicans were. There aren't any detractors anymore. Even though, like Nikki Haley spoke, it's just changed dramatically. So I wanted to get your take on that in terms of how dramatically it's changed the Republican Party itself into complete consolidation around Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable transformation. And 8 years ago, we paid a lot of attention to Republican groups like the Lincoln Project as they were putting out, ad after ad, just absolutely attacking Donald Trump. And sure, those sorts of groups still exist, but they don't have nearly the sway that they used to. Now, I do see some, cracks in the party, though. Let's not forget Nikki Haley did run a pretty robust challenge to Trump in the primary. She did get quite a significant number of votes. If only a handful of delegates, which to me represents that there is still some anti-Trumpism in the party, even if most of those folks will hold their nose and pull the lever for Trump come November. But you also saw some dissension on the floor. When Mitch McConnell appeared on the floor to represent Kentucky, he was booed, right?
And he might be the most accomplished conservative lawmaker of our time.
Certainly, if you're a Republican who cares about judicial reform, Mitch McConnell is maybe the most successful party leader in Senate history when it comes to shaping the direction of the judiciary, right? So I do still see some movement in the joints, right? That being said, compared to 2016, the amount of unity in the Republican Party is striking. And you could say the exact opposite about the Democratic Party.
Well, I was going to ask you, we only got about a minute left, but I wanted to ask you, we got about 90 days between now and the election. We don't know what's going to happen, but should there be a change at the top of the ticket, do Democrats have enough time to have the opportunity to have the same kind of consolidation, unity, to give them momentum comparable, to give them a chance really to compete with the Republicans in November?
Yeah, I see a path, but that path cannot be a wide open convention. We haven't seen an honest to God floor fight for a party nomination in most of our lifetimes at this point. I doubt the institutional capacity of the Democratic Party to do that effortlessly, because there isn't that institutional memory of the last time they negotiated a floor fight. So if Biden is going to not be the nominee, there will have to be a significant amount of maneuvering behind the scenes to minimize the extent to which there's any question who the nominee will be. And that's why most political scientists I know say there's no chance that it's not going to be Kamala Harris, because the alternative would be chaos. And if you thought your chances were bleak with Biden, strap in for what happens with a bare knuckle fight on the convention floor in Chicago.
Wow. We are living history right now. We're out of time, but David, thanks again for coming on. Congratulations on your new post in Louisiana. We'll miss our conversations here, but congratulations and thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.